shares of Organigram trading lower today after the cannabis company posted lower than expected net revenue. Joining us to talk about this is the new CEO, James Yamanaka. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about net revenue coming in $10 million lower than anticipated. I know you've just started the job, 3 weeks literally on the job, but what's your storyline around why it came in that way?
First of all, I think in bigger picture context, on a year-on-year basis, net revenues were up by about 49%. Adjusted EBITDA is up about 5.3%. And even with those results, recent results, we continue to hold our guidance for the year. In terms of the miss in the first quarter this year, it was largely due to a number of temporary issues. Number one was a softer overall market. Two, there was a strike in BC, which meant we were out of stock for about 8 weeks. And three, there were some spec issues with some of our international exports. All of these things are temporary and things that in British Columbia, for example, it's already back to normal, and the rest are temporary, so we're still confident in the full year guidance.
When you say lower demand, was that sort of internationally? Because I know you work in Germany, you distribute in certain spots, or working with the US and Australia?
No, this is Canada, essentially flat year on year, so a little softer as an overall market than was expected. The markets in Germany continue to grow.
Okay. You had an acquiry of Motif. I'm wondering how that's working. Are there synergies from that yet?
Yeah, I think at this point we're fundamentally done with the Motif acquisition. I came in, as I said, 3.5 weeks ago. It is one company, so the integration period is completed. And I think we've generated now the $50 million of synergies that we announced last year.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about some of the markets you are looking at and maybe looking to expand. You mentioned Germany is still strong. What do you think is feeding that demand there? How are you doing in Australia?
I think in all these markets, I think the thing that drives it is a regulatory system where people can operate. So in Germany, you have a system that works. It's been growing exponentially over the last few years, and we expect that to continue. There's a few markets in other markets in Europe that there are open to medical cannabis. And the US, with the recent announcements, I think it's a bit uncertain from a Organigram point of view, because although we're in the market, it remains a relatively small part of our business with under 1% of our revenues, because we've been quite prudent to make sure that we are measured in how we invest in the US.
Are you going to gear up if things change in the US and you have greater access to the market?
I think a lot has to happen from a regulatory point of view to make it possible or advisable for Organigram to move into that market. We've taken, as I said, a measured approach, and I think we'll continue to make sure we don't underinvest but don't overinvest. And I think in the short term, the priority is probably more to allocate the capital to the Canadian market as well as the growth in Europe.
Okay, so where do you see growth coming from this year and next?
I think this year it'll be, our performance in Canada remains strong. We're still the market leader in Canada. I think there's improvements we can do. We've held our gross margin flat despite sort of the softer Q1, and I think that's a good indicator of our ability to drive greater margin over that time. And I think over the next couple of years, I think a large proportion of the growth will come from international sales, particularly Germany, but other markets as well. We also export to the UK, to Australia, and to a few other markets in Europe as well.
What are the products you do well with?
I think generally, Organigram, we're the market leader across the board. I think we have a very strong position in gummies. We're just launching some drinks products. We're making good progress there. I was in Winnipeg last week and I saw the new beverage line coming. And in the next couple of months, there's a couple of launches I'm quite excited about with multi-packs of beverages, but also shots where we have a claim that we can justify of 15 minutes on set, which is a differentiator in the market. So I think there's general overall strength, but some exciting new things to come.
What's the competition like in the space these days?
It's very, very competitive. I think compared to where it come from, it is even more competitive. That there's a lot of players remaining in the market. I think, given that, you have to be on top of your game, on top of your pricing, execute extremely well, and from our point of view, we really need to focus on reducing the COGS, doing things like improving our yields by about 50%, which we did this year, to be able to make sure we can compete effectively in the market.
And pricing, I guess, is key.
Look, you take pricing when you can take it. I don't think the model depends on it. But we have strong brands. We have 3 of the top 10 brands in Canada. And I think we can leverage that for some pricing. But fundamentally, we also just need to improve the gross margin from a little on the top line, but also to make sure we really drive some of the savings and productivity gains on the bottom, on the cost side.
Okay. We do have to leave it there. James Yamanaka, CEO of Organigram, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.